I'm Bill Voice, and this is
Dave Nicholson, and again it's Mike with us this time as well.
Yeah, Mike. We try our best with Mike, don't we? But he often has a.
Sometimes we have
he's variable, is Mike. I think he drinks a little bit on a Saturday, so he's never up to much. But anyway, so you remember me looking at this, and this is Darren Harvey's Dracula kit, and I was waxing lyrical about how beautiful it is because I've a soft spot for both Hammer and Universal. For me, they're two different kettles of fish to me, mate.
They are, and I think what we're going to do this time, we're going to just put a little bit of meat on the bones. A few people have PM'd us and messaged us and asked us if we could show them a few bits and pieces what are available regarding the pieces we spoke, like the films, etc. Hammer. Please note, guys, we can only do the reviews and talk about the stuff that we've actually got. We know the stuff's out there. We can't give an opinion or talk about it unless we actually see it. So today, me and Bill are just going to go a little bit in more depth regarding Hammer, which is close to Bill's art, and then Universal. And then the next video will be the classic 80s stuff, Freddy, etc. But today it's the Hammer and Universal.
But for me, Hammer is... I love Hammer because what is implied in Universal horror movies like Dracula biting your neck and stuff like that. If you look at the Universal movies, there's very little horror. It's very much implied or inferred. It's very much symbolic, the horror. Whereas when the British film industry decided to remake these movies in the 1950s, they decided that they were going to go full on.
They were going to do the gore.
They were going to do the gore. Dracula did have fangs, and you were going to see blood, and you were going to see him bite people. You were going to see people stake through the heart. You're going to see blood everywhere. It's kind of more of a British tradition. I think it goes back to the kind of the music hall, this sort of Grand Guignol type thing, where people are very, very earthy and forceful. And I think when you look at Hammer movies, they were a shock to the rest of the world, but I think the British just took it in their stride, really. Considering we'd all been, by that point, a lot of people had been through the war, and without trying to get too sociological about it, people had gone through D-Day and places, things like that, and they'd seen gore for the real thing. So seeing it on the screen wasn't that big a deal for them, was it? Because they'd actually seen the real thing. We have here, and it's like a kid in a sweet shop, I've got some absolutely wonderful stuff here, and it's by Mike Hill primarily, isn't it? It's Mike Hill stuff.
Yeah,
and we're just going to have a quick look at it.
We're going to go through them because there's a lot of guys out there that are new to the hobby that didn't realise this stuff was widely available. I'll give you a brief background in it. Mike's a friend of mine, and in the early days of the hobby, Mike was one of the founders, and he came out with this idea to do these Hammer stuff. And I'm not joking, it revolutionised the hobby because some of the stuff he's done is fantastic, and still to this day, I don't care what anyone says, can't be bettered, because some of his stuff is just absolutely fantastic. I mean, Bill, it's the first time Bill's actually picked this up. Yeah. So what you're seeing now is a completely raw reaction to it.
I mean, look at that. I'll put it a bit closer to the camera without disturbing Mike there, but look at the detail. Not just on the figure itself, but the base. Sometimes I pick something like this up and I feel a real tingle of excitement.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's not nice, is it? It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is. It's breathtakingly. It's gothic in the extreme. You've got a fantastic rendition of Christopher Lee.
Likeness is fantastic.
The likeness is.
That's got to be. I mean, we'll talk about another guy in a minute, but Mike that's got to be one of the best Lee likenesses. Gotta be.
And just gotta be. Even though it's just a bust, you can just visually you can trace the rest of the figure. This is Christopher Lee moving.
Yeah.
He's not rigid like the Lugosi Dracula, which was quite sort of expressionistic in his movements. He was almost like a supervillain, really. As a Dracula, he was a supervillain, and he is an amazingly imposing actor. And this, look at the swagger on this shoulder blade here. The way that you can see him moving through space. It's going for it. You can see the remnants of the cape and stuff here.
Have you seen the wrinkles on the nose? I mean, if we're talking years ago, but look at the quality of the detail that Mike's put in.
It's like when a dog growls at you, isn't it? Look at that. I mean, it is really animalistic. That.
He's not just done the nose, etc. He's done all the detailing where his nose is all ramped up. To me, it's just still amazing. A good one. And this like crypt style base to it with the cross on it and Dracula. It's got that beautiful sort of like old world writing on it. Yeah, fantastic.
And it just feels solid, doesn't it?
It's good. It's good size.
Great. It's great. And I would say if you're going to buy a Christopher Lee and you're new in the hobby, and you want something to just practice on, but you're going to get a really good result regardless of your painting skills, this is going to guide you through that.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Because if you just concentrate on the basics and the detail, that's going to give you an absolutely superb outcome. Even I would attempt to paint something like this, I have to say.
That's great.
It is a thing of beauty and a joy forever. The folds in the cloth, everything. There's not one area that's not been treated with total respect.
Regarding Dracula, at the similar sort of time, Mike did a figure, which I'll put pictures on shortly, and it's kind of like Dracula just stood there with his cape, and even in the size of the head this big, he got this detail.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Superb,
I mean, just look at the hair, the detail of the hair. That is actually what Christopher Lee's hair looked like on that particular movie.
Superb.
It's not like an imaginary thing. It's an actual
Absolutely superb.
strand for strand copy.
Yeah, really
so,
nice.
So there's
Really
that,
nice.
which is absolutely spot on.
We've got another Lee one.
We've got another Lee one, which I want to talk to you about. Now, Dracula obviously is a classic piece of literature, as is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which came out in 1818. So most of these really incredible Gothic characters have a sort of, I don't know, a basis in high literature, don't they?
Yeah.
The only story I've read about Mummy was, I think, by Edgar Allan Poe.
Right, okay.
That was the only one of it. So the Mummy doesn't kind of have that literary background. It comes more from the 1920s, when the idea of when Lord Carnarvon found Tutankhamun, and there was the sort of like the rumour of the curse.
That's it, yeah.
So all the Mummy movies kind of come from that. And if you think about the original Karloff Mummy movie, it wasn't that long after they discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was only, 10 years or so?
Yeah.
So this is Christopher Lee as the Mummy. And when Hammer did a successful Dracula, they decided to do Frankenstein and the Mummy and all the Universal greats. Obviously not with the same titles, and obviously with a slight difference because of copyright.
On the design, you mean?
Yeah, on the design. So this is an absolutely wonderful rendition, and it's often hard to get the likeness of an actor through the makeup and into a sculpt. But that is most definitely Christopher Lee. And if
Again,
you look at the profile,
Mike's work, Mike
Hill
Hilford.
again, and obviously the base is treated just as beautifully as the rest of it. You got this kind of pyramid design at the bottom there.
I like how he's finished it at the back as well. Have you seen how he's finished it off around the back here and put like
see the blocks,
the blocks and stuff?
There, yeah.
I love it. I mean, he's not just give it a straight back. He's put like some texture on it.
What I love about these is this takes me back to the 1970s with my comic books, David. And there used to be a comic book called Dracula Lives.
Yep.
And it was a Marvel comic called Dracula Lives, and the main artist on that was a guy called John Buscema.
Right.
And he's a famous artist. And if you look at and another guy called Alfred Alcala, and if you look at their drawings, they're absolutely classic 1970s, super detailed cartoons. And these give me that same feeling when I look at these, that when I used to look at my Dracula Lives comic, they give me that feeling that there's something really important going on. And even at the back there, you can see the detail of the costume. This is actually part of the costume. This is the bit where Christopher Lee got dressed up in this, which was essentially a converted straitjacket.
Okay.
And you can actually see the collar here of the costume. That is totally authentic.
Oh, and if you look at the ear, if you just turn it there, you can see like the bandage going, the reminiscence of bandage.
Yeah, the bandages on his head and everything.
Detail's
detail's fantastic. You can't beat that. So as a companion piece to the Dracula,
That's superb.
If you get one, you'd have to get the other, wouldn't you? I would.
Well, there's several we've got to come to.
I've got a couple more.
There's a few more. That's not just it. Superb.
Now, obviously, Lon Chaney is the Wolfman, but during his career, this is Curse of the Werewolf, and it's Oliver Reed. Now, Oliver Reed, to me, was always this character, even when he was slightly sober. I mean, he always
don't think that was very often, was it?
It wasn't very often. But once again, it's another one of Mike's, and you can see that the way the bust has been treated, you've got this lovely slash effect there. It's like the claws have raked.
You got the nameplate, haven't you?
Yeah, got the nameplate.
And the bars that go on there suspend it up like that.
Yeah,
so it's
this is like a real beautiful piece. So this is a little bit of a kit as well. So you can position this above the bars because of the famous still. He's behind the bars. He's ripping through the bars, isn't he?
Again, he's got all the wrinkles in the face and all. It's just a lot of movement.
And the makeup on this one. The makeup on this one always reminds me of the box art of the Aurora box art for the werewolf, and the werewolf kit by
that
Aurora.
was weird, wasn't
it's
it?
kind of weird. Boris, what's his name? Was his who's the
Valeggio,
No, anyway. It was a quite a famous artist. The box art on the Aurora monsters was always better than the monster inside.
That's it, yeah.
But this is almost a makeup creation on this with the wolf-like ears, and the very light treatment of the face. I mean, I think it's a testament to Oliver Reed's werewolfiness.
Yeah.
That he didn't really need much facial makeup, but he did have the sort of balaclava of the hair and stuff, and he nailed it as a werewolf. A totally sympathetic character.
Yeah.
Really sad ending to the movie, and I think that was kind of true. And I think it was set in somewhere like Spain or something. Wasn't it? Spain, I think it was set in. So it's got that kind of Loup Garou type, real sort of legendary feel about it. And once again, unlike Frankenstein and Dracula, there's not really been that much literature that features this.
No.
But a lot of folk tales from the Eastern Europe and stuff, and Spain and places like that feature.
It's great, isn't it?
People.
It's around about a third scale, so it's quite a nice chunky piece. It's just big enough, but not too big. At the time, Mike did 2 figures. He did 12-inch tall one of Oliver Reed, and he also did a 10-inch. And they're really good. They're available still, I think, through Creatures Unlimited. Gary at Creatures, if you're still about, just check him out on eBay. But these ones are now mine, which is great. I'll tell you the story about these once Bill's finished. But they were the ones at the time of the Curse of the Werewolf that are out in the UK, and I stress the UK.
So this is a bit of a rarity, and I think we need somebody to perhaps in the comments below to confirm or deny what this is. This is the Evil of Frankenstein. It's one of the Hammer movies. Hammer made several Hammer movies in the sense that it was called Frankenstein, and we all know that Frankenstein is the professor, not the monster, because the monster in the book is referred to, as I know from my millions and millions of years of being married to an English teacher, is the creature, right? But I'm pretty sure that if you asked him, he'd say, it's all right to call me Frankenstein, I don't mind, right? But Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is the professor. So the Hammer movies are a bit more true to the book in a sense that Frankenstein is the character that follows through the movies. Right. Frankenstein himself, played by the wonderful Peter Cushing, who is master of horror. He plays Frankenstein in nearly every one of them, just like he plays Van Helsing in all the Draculas, but it is his part. And he plays this strangely sort of likeable but extremely evil, ruthless guy. Because you kind of like him, but you're kind of a bit worried that he wants to turn you into an undead monster. Because that's not something you say on date night, is it? Do you mind if I turn you into an undead monster? So this is the Evil of Frankenstein. Now, we haven't looked it up, but I think it was played by a wrestler called Kiwi Johnson.
I think you might be right there.
It's something to me. I've got an old House of Hammer magazine at home somewhere.
You might be right there.
With all the people who played the Frankenstein monster. Really big actors like Freddie Jones played the Frankenstein monster by accident when he had the top of his head cut off by Peter Cushing. We've had Dave Prowse, the legendary Darth Vader, who also played the Frankenstein monster. And if you think about the stature of that man, the actual size of it,
cut out for it.
It's cut out for it, and he does play a great monster. But once again, like Darth Vader, he doesn't actually do the voice.
No.
Because if you were going like this, and I'm the Frankenstein's monster, I really am, you'd be not really scared, would you?
No.
I am your father, Luke.
That's how he actually talks,
and that's
guys.
how Dave Prowse actually talks. So that's probably why. But this is an absolutely beautiful piece of work. Once again, it is so true to the makeup, and the makeup on this one was quite robotic.
Yeah, there seems to be some machinery type stuff.
Yeah, there's mechanical elements to the makeup. There are clips and stuff that hold the front of the head on, very much like the trial makeup that they did for the original Lugosi movie, but they kind of got that and they've used it. It's got this mechanical feel to it.
Looks great, doesn't it?
It looks absolutely great.
This one was sculpted by a guy called Pete McKenna, and this one, believe it or not, was the hardest one for me to acquire. Because originally when Mike decided he wasn't doing it anymore, I purchased all of them off him, and we didn't have a master for this, so this has just come to light over the last 12 months by a guy called Kirk. So big shout out to Kirk for making this happen. But when Mike contacted me to buy all the other Hammer busts that you've just seen, I jumped on it. I couldn't say no. I just had to have them, but we didn't have one of these, but we eventually got round to getting it this last year, I think, and So it's now available, this one, again, which is great. That's good news.
I mean, there's a lot of Frankenstein stuff out there. I'd say this is a real rarity.
There was a lot of people that used to... Yeah, there was a lot of guys that used to ask me for this. And I never had a master for years, and you didn't see it. And then when it popped up, I spoke to Kurt, and I said, mate, I explained, and he was more than happy to help. So again, a big shout out to Kurt. So thanks for making that.
I mean, it's good because it's scaled up with the others, isn't it? And
this is where this will fetch us nicely onto the others. All of these busts are all in the same scale, the 1/3 scale. So they were a nice size. They came out at the right time. We now have acquired the rights to do them. We've had them for a long time now. That's the castings, so this is what you'll get, which fetches us on to the next one, which bizarrely is a different scale, but it's in the same series.
And it's I think it's rather nice, but I wouldn't I? But this is Ingrid Pitt from The Vampire Lovers.
That's it.
A really kind of controversial film at the time. A little bit of nudity, which was unusual.
Well, there's a little bit on that.
There's a little bit of nudity there. She has a healthy physique, let's put it that way. So you could spend quite a lot of time painting that, couldn't you?
Yeah, this one was... This one was sculpted by Claire Pearson.
I'm going to put my hand there, actually.
Yeah,
so
please
keep
do.
it decent.
Yeah, this one was sculpted by Claire Pearson, who was part of the Shapeshifters. I hope I've said that right, Shapeshifters team at the time. Claire did this one. Maybe that's why it's a slightly different scale than the others, but this was probably one of the last ones with the Evil of Frankenstein to come out, because Dracula and Curse of the Werewolf came out roughly at the same time, then The Mummy, and then these two. So they're all now available for ourselves.
If we actually look, when I was talking about a lot of these stories having their origins in great literature, obviously Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but at the same time there was a writer who wrote quite good horror called Sheridan Le Fanu, I think his name was, and he's an English writer, but he wrote a lot of vampire stories. He was into his vampires, and he wrote a book called Carmilla, which is like a classic sort of horror book about this vampire seductress that basically seduces and kills people, and eventually gets staked through her heart. This movie, The Vampire Lovers, is based on that great book.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
yeah. So as cheesy and as controversial and slightly rude that this movie is, it is actually based on great literature, which goes to show that great literature is well worth a read sometimes. Because it's not always what you expect. I think this is a particularly sensuous sculpt here, and the way that she's got the arms and stuff. It's just lovely. It's a nice piece. It's a lovely piece. I think for me, it interests me in a sense that it's kind of very indicative of a certain sensuality that Hammer movies had, that was very overt.
Yeah.
That the Universal movies didn't have. They had beautiful, pale sort of women looking into the distance and all the rest of it. But the Hammer movies had a very, very sort of strong, identifiable actresses, didn't they? Obviously, we had Ingrid Pitt. We've got Caroline Munro and people like that who basically they were the Bond girls. In fact, Caroline Munro was a Bond girl, wasn't she? Yeah. So we'll put this down here.
Right. Well, this takes us on to the next guy. This is partially painted.
Yeah.
Just be careful with the back of it, mate. Still. So basically, this one's partially painted one. This is by a different. Yeah, this is. That just slides into there. Yeah. Now this is by a different guy. Now you talk about years ago when Mike was doing it, and Mike was the man to go to, which was basically for your Hammer and your Dracula stuff. Mm-hmm. The new guy that's obsessed with it is a guy called Steve Thompson. Steve does a work for me, and this one's sculpted by Steve. Obviously, this one's halfway through being painted now, and it's Steve. I think Steve is obsessed with Christopher Lee. He loves Christopher Lee. To Mike, it's like that. It's like that. Mike and Steve, I've got some of the best likenesses out there.
If you wanted somebody, if you were going to ask somebody to. You were going to commission somebody to do, Dracula, Frankenstein, a classic kit. We've got. The first person who comes to mind who has my ultimate respect is Jeff Yeager.
Right.
Because since I've been in the hobby, I've seen his stuff, and he's an American sculptor, isn't he? And he's got a massive following.
He's got a massive following.
The work is absolutely beautiful. But bearing in mind this is an English themed horror from an English movie, I'm thinking to myself, is there somebody that you would choose? Who would, if you were going to pick someone to commission, and this doesn't reflect on the skill of anybody.
Are we talking Frankenstein?
I told you Frankenstein. We're talking Frankenstein. We're talking We'll talk Karloff, right?
Okay.
We're talking Karloff. We're talking Frankenstein, the ultimate Frankenstein.
Right.
Which is, we're going to come back to this, aren't we, in an article soon about Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. But if you wanted the ultimate Frankenstein for you, and you were going to commission it, who would you ask?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Well, I'm being controversial in the sense that the first person I would just think, get in touch with Jaeger, get him to do it. But I'm thinking,
Jaeger or Mike Hill, you mean?
Well, Mike Hill would, looking at the stuff we've seen by Mike, about the Dracula and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's got to be Mike. It's got to be Mike Hill.
Right. Okay.
The reason I say that is, sorry, all you Jaeger fans, I don't want to offend anybody. Jeff's a fantastic sculptor.
I mean that
sorry
was
about
our
that.
first
Sorry
choice.
about
That
that.
would be my first choice. I would go with Jaeger. I would say Jaeger.
You go Jaeger.
I would, because I've seen his work so many times and I really admire him as a sculptor, and whenever he does something it just tends to look just like it's supposed to be.
For me, it'd have to be Mike.
Right. Okay.
Mike Hill all day long. Mike, the reason why I would pick Mike is because Mike is I don't know Jeff, so that's probably I'm biased because I don't know Jeff that well. Oh, I don't know him at all, but I know Mike, and he's so fanatical about these things. He's passionate. Yeah. He really does put his heart and soul in it, and he's like your first rock star before you get your Jaegers and Nagels, etc. So Mike, to me, he was doing it at the beginning, and I've seen some. So I still think his Dracula holds up as one of the best Draculas.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's but I've worked with some fantastic people. You know, I mean, but Universal. The reason I do that, when I tend to get people to sculpt things for me, I like them to have a passion and an affinity for it. So I know Mike absolutely loves them monsters. So I know I'm going to get 150%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, I work with some guys like, some of the guys I work with now, like Joe and Paul and stuff. I know what their passions are. So, if it was a different question for a different subject matter, it would be a different answer. Yeah. So for me, sorry, Jeff, it would be Mike every day of the week.
I mean, one of the reasons I like Jeff's work is because the surfaces are so pristine, and that's what sort of intrigues me about it. That he's almost, without wishing to in any way undermine the passion that Jeff probably has when he does it. It's like he's a machine. You know what I mean? It's like that's perfection.
Yeah.
Whereas I suppose with Mike's, you've got that slightly sculptural soul to it.
You've got a soul.
Yeah.
With Mike, I know that his heart's in it. I know you've got a piece of Mike. Yeah. When he did the Dracula, if he's done anything for me with Mike, like the Draculas, etc., you're getting a piece of Mike. He really wants this to be the best. Right. It's the best. Almost, I want this, and it's almost an obsession with the bloke. Which is nice because there's a lot of love there. There's a lot of love in it, whereas you've just said there seems to be like a machine.
In a great way, though.
Yeah.
I suppose it's another word for precision.
Yeah.
With Jeff, you get that ultimate precision.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what you're getting, and I suppose with Mike, you're getting a sort of a more, not creative, but a more artistic flavour, perhaps a bit of
a real passion.
But the passion is obvious. It's not integral. It's obvious. It surfaces, doesn't it? Maybe.
If you ever meet Mike, and I hope we can try and get him sometime to do stuff. He's passionate. The guy's very knowledgeable. He's very, very passionate about what he does, and he's very good. And he's got the breaks he quite rightly deserved. He's on doing movies now, but for me, I think it's when you don't see somebody do something, and then all of a sudden they'll do this. They just come out. Like if you see something every day,
yeah.
Like I say, because we're seeing quite a lot of Jeff stuff. No disrespect again, but we're seeing it quite a lot. We're not seeing much of Mike. So if all of a sudden when Mike does something, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah.
So whereas you just go, oh, that's another great one by Jeff. Oh,
Yeah.
it's another good one.
Yeah.
Whereas if, oh, Jesus, Mike's done a
Yeah,
good
he is,
one.
yeah.
Bloody hell, Mike.
So there's a kind of rarity value in it as well, then, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong.
It's almost like an occasion.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Jeff's done some amazing stuff, but I think it's horses for courses. How I run my business is different people. I try and pick the best person for the job. So there's certain items that I would say, oh no, you've got to pick Steve Thompson. You've got to pick Andy Copeland. I mean, these people are equally as good, but I think if they're, they've got to be into this thing. They've got to be passionate about it. Darren Kent's a perfect example. He loves Alien.
Oh yeah!
If you said it was an alien,
every
day of the week.
Dan, I go with that.
Every day of the week it'd be Darren.
Obsessed,
you know what I mean?
He's obsessed.
Oh God, he's obsessed with it.
He's obsessed.
So regarding Universal, we take everybody out of the equation and we look at the fanatical sculptors that are fanatical. And for me, on this occasion, it would be Mike.
Yeah.
If it was a Hammer one, it'd be a tough call between Steve.
Yeah.
And again, Mike. That would be my call. If you're doing Hammer, it would be a tough call. It'd be Steve Thompson or Mike. Sound really biased now towards the Brits. We've got to be a little bit.
Well, we are biased towards the Brits we are kind of in one sense in that case they're sort of more available here, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, with the Jaeger kit, as much as I love it, I mean, I've got this creature by Jaeger.
It's great, that one.
That is just stunning. It's the box art tribute to the Aurora kit.
Yeah.
It just blows the Aurora kit out of the water. It is the actual. It looks so much like the actual creature coming out of the water. Same pose as the Aurora kit, same base as the Aurora kit, but everything on it just looks like it's alive.
Yeah.
Every single scale on that Jaeger one. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love it. Is because it's like a miniature version of reality.
Yeah.
I
suppose for me, from a producer, I mean, we've all got our sort of faves. I suppose as a producer, as I keep saying, you have to look at it as a who's going to give you the best, who's going to give you the, I'm not saying other people want, but who's going to give you that little bit more, a little wow factor, a little X factor. And I always do it. I mean, you say Planet of the Apes, it's got to be Paul, hasn't it?
It's Paul Fay.
Because Paul's apes are fantastic, aren't
brilliant.
they?
Yeah,
Paul's fantastic. You can't fault them, can I? Aliens, you're definitely going to pick Darren. Likenesses, Andy all day long, and Joe Bailey. I mean, Joe does a werewolf like nobody does.
Yeah, he's very good at werewolves.
Joe Bailey, Joe's fur technique, King Kong's stunning. I mean, you got to admit that. I mean, some of Joe's likenesses, like that Tony Soprano and the Cape Fear and the Falling Down. Oh, come on, they're fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah, you can't.
So you've got to basically look at. I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned anybody. There are other sculptors out there, but you've got to look at it and say, right, okay, I know this guy loves this, so let's go with him. Yeah. I mean, for me, as the question you asked with Frankenstein, Michael got to be on this occasion.
Okay, that's great.
But anyway, back to this one. This one is a Steve Thompson one. It's a twin figure kit, roughly 1/5 scale. It's slightly larger than 1/6. Now it's still available. Christopher Lee, Carolyn Monroe. Yeah. And it basically just slots together.
Yeah,
so you've got your two pieces. You've got the Lee, the Carolyn Monroe, and a set of hands for Monroe, and then a nice little base. I believe Keith Cousins did me this. We're hoping to try and get Keith on in the next couple of weeks because he's coming down. This one's available. So that seems to wrap up the Hammer stuff that's available. We also do a large scale Oliver Reed sculpted by Mark Van Tyne, Curse of the Werewolf. That's a nice piece, Bill.
I don't think I've seen it.
You haven't seen that one? I'll try and get that one out for you next time. That kit, but that's the Hammer side. Now, which do you prefer, Bill? Hammer or Universal?
Well, in my art school days, I was a pure Universal kind of guy because of the black and white elegance of it, and they're classical movies with classical themes, and I loved them. And the idea of looking at when you look at Universal, you're not just looking at. The thing is, in American movies, with all the technique and everything, but a lot of the directors, for instance, were English, and a lot of the actors, like Colin Clive and all of those people, were very, very much English actors. Obviously, the great Boris Karloff, English actor. So they've got a very European feel about them for the time, the Universal horrors. They're made by Germans and English and Czechs and stuff like that in the studios in America. So people like Lugosi and stuff, they bring that sort of continental Eastern European mysticism to it. So even though most people see them as the definitive black and white horror movies, they have a real history with them, and they refer back to like the German expressionist cinema of the 1900s, 1920s and early 30s, things like Fritz Lang and people like that. I mean, Nosferatu Symphony in Grey, which then became Dracula, is a classic silent German movie. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is like
Have you seen that Thomas Kuntz kit of that?
It's well, yeah. You see, you've got that lovely zigzag expression.
Yeah, that's it. That's amazing.
And if you look at the directors, and particularly the director of Frankenstein, James Wales, who was an English director, he'd just gone through the First World War and been injured in the trenches, like a lot of the people had gone through this hideous First World War thing. So when they went to Hollywood, or when they came back to England to do a few things, even people like Hitchcock and stuff, which started off back in the day, they brought that sort of continental European thing to Hollywood. Which to me, it's a bit like watching Disney's Pinocchio or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's got that sort of folk tale feel to it, which is almost dreamy. So for me, as structured, written
Go on, what are you gonna say?
movies, I would say the Universals will always be my favourite.
Which monster? Which creature? Which monster? Go on, putting you on the spot now.
My favourite creature is Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster, because he is so lovely and kind and misunderstood. I also love Lon Chaney as the werewolf for the same reason, that he's misunderstood. In terms of Dracula, look, I've said it many times, the ultimate Dracula is always going to be Lugosi, but my favourite Dracula is Christopher Lee.
Now you contradict yourself.
Yeah, but the film Dracula, the original film Dracula, the 1930s early black and white with Bela Lugosi, it's based on the stage play, and I think that Bram Stoker had a hand in writing it, or at least was influential in writing it. The classical music, which is Swan Lake, and stuff in the background, and the black and white imagery of it is so stark, and the evil is so subtle. That's the only way that evil could live as a vampire, was with subtlety. Whereas, fair dues to Christopher Lee, he's a great Dracula, but he is a monster rampaging around the countryside,
killing people.
Nobody's in any doubt about Dracula being Dracula when it comes to Christopher Lee, because he's chomping on your neck, isn't he? And you can see the blood. Whereas Lugosi, he kind of slides in there. He's looking suave and debonair, and he's a bit strange, but you could kind of see him inveigling himself into society and suddenly creating this vampiric plague.
Oh, right.
I don't know, maybe I'm being too art school about this, I don't know.
Would you say that the Frankenstein movie that was released in 1932,
Right,
31, sorry, in the UK that is, in the States 31?
31 in the United States, 31, yeah, you're right, and 32 in the UK.
Would you say that changed the landscape of film?
I'd say
genre?
the
Frankenstein movie.
Yeah, I'd say the Dracula movie kind of sort of like set it off, but I'd say Frankenstein, the James Wales movie,
the one
is the one from
changed everything.
Changed everything. That is,
changed how we look at
the Dracula was the root, but Frankenstein was the seed that horror came from.
Yeah. So all your Freddys and your Jasons.
Oh yeah, it's all that. It's all there.
It's all come from there.
Come from there, because like Dracula's this kind of urbane kind of guy that goes into society and just happens to be like an undead vampire that's going to bite your neck. Whereas we're really with Frankenstein, the movie and the book, which once again great literature, asks us some really fundamental questions about what is a soul, what is life, what it would be like to not have a soul and just have an existence, and who's responsible for it. I mean, even bigger questions like, is God watching this? Is there a God? If we can do this, is man God? Is God man? Are we reflecting in religion what we can see in people, or are we just fated and going? All those kind of massive questions that I ain't even going to try and answer. But all those questions come from that book. And that movie by James Wales, who's a superb director, it is so well fashioned. It is self-contained. it comes up with all sorts of things. The Mad Professor, the Woman in Peril, the Misguided Monster,
the design of the monster,
Jack Pierce.
Yeah.
Jack Pierce, the design of the monster. There's that. There's the scenics like the laboratory, the castle with the lightning.
Oh, God,
I mean, come on! It's like every single thing you want in a horror movie. Because looking back at it now, it looks like one big. You can read it as one big cliche, but cliches exist because they reflect what we often see, and because that's the original. You can't see it as cliched because that's the movie that made the cliches.
He was kind of like the granddaddy of all horror films.
Oh, he was by all means.
And that is probably why there's so many Frankenstein kits.
I think Karloff as Frankenstein has so much in it. First of all, he's terribly frightening in terms of his physique because he was a big guy. He was a big guy in real life. I mean, he was extended on those asphalt spreaders boots because that's what those boots are. They're actually asphalt spreaders boots.
Are they?
Yeah, they're boots with massive soles so you can walk across the hot asphalt and roller it flat, basically without burning your feet. So when they wanted to jack him up, they are actually asphalt spreaders boots. They are actually a piece of safety equipment. But to me, that kind of... Did you not know that? They are asphalt spreaders boots, yeah. So they had these big boots on, which gives him a bit more. But he was about 6'2". He's a biggish guy, but he's very imposing. He had a slight lisp. But he's got those piercing eyes. Karloff, yeah.
Am I correct in saying, and I'm sure Mike told me this, that to play the part, he had dentures and he took it out and it made him more...
Yeah, it made him more gaunt, yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. He had like it... Because he was a labourer for years. When he went to Hollywood, he ended up being a labourer, so he had a really tough start. He came from London. He was someone, William Pratt, I think his name was. And he had a really tough life as a kid. So when he got a chance to go to America, he went to America basically because he realised if he stayed in London, he was going to starve to death, basically. So he went to America, like a lot of actors did, like Cary Grant and people like that. He went to America. He got some early parts playing villains. He basically played gangsters' henchmen. And then he got the job as the Frankenstein's monster, which he thought was only going to be like a very small part of his life. He thought, I'll do it. Maybe. I don't want to play a monster, but I will play a monster. So they made him into this monster, and that was basically the film that made him.
Frankenstein.
Oh yeah, because everything from there on, isn't it? And the only problem with him was that he'd done a lot of Shakespeare and he's a really good stage actor to an extent, but he never really got the parts that would allow him to show his art.
Because he'd been typecasted
as a monster. But then again, I think the fact that he lived a reasonably good life and he didn't die penniless like a lot of actors did.
No.
So that fact that he did that was... I think that made him as a person.
Well, I remember talking to Karloff. I remember my first trip was to Chiller, which is a show in the United States, and I had this Frankenstein's monster T-shirt on. It was green and had the monster all over it. And we were at Chiller, never been to America before. We're stood behind a table. I've got this T-shirt on, and this woman came walking past with several people, and she stopped and she went, "I love your T-shirt," and I was like, "Oh, thank you very much." And I said,
was it Karloff's daughter, wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, man.
How good's that?
That's brilliant.
Right? She said, "I love your T-shirt." And I'm like,
"Oh, wow."
Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know she was.
All right. Well, it's like Bela Lugosi's got son. Often does conventions.
Yeah.
You know.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
It's bright. You know the Frankenstein green that he had.
Yeah,
it's like green with loads of Karloff impressions. It's obviously an official T-shirt.
Yeah.
And I'm stood there and this woman, and I thought, who's this strange woman?
Well, she's probably getting something like 20 cents off that T-shirt.
She just went, "Love your T-shirt," and I went, "Oh, thank you very much."
Well, we've got a little Frankenstein here, haven't we?
We have. This is Andy's Frankenstein. I think what we're going to have to do is we're probably going to have to break this, because it's one of Bill's favourites. We're going to have to break the Universal down to several segments. Frankenstein, Wolfman, etc. So we'll just do Frankenstein for the day, and then we'll do the rest. Yeah, this is one by Andy Copeland.
Nice two-piece.
Yeah, he has the little
Beautiful,
bolts.
appropriate base, laboratory equipment with your sort of like isolators on the top.
You can see them going off.
Yeah, you can see them going off. It's got some dials on the front, and there you go. Look at that. Now, he's obsessed with getting the image right, isn't he? I mean, how many times has he done this before he actually released one?
Yeah.
I mean, he's obsessive about the whole thing. I mean, he doesn't just knock out a Frankenstein, does he? He spends hours.
He's redone it again.
Has he redone it? That's the problem, you see.
Slightly bigger.
Slightly bigger, but it's probably, if you bought this and you bought the bigger one, there would be some difference, because he never leaves his work alone, does
No, he doesn't.
He's constantly striving for
perfection, yeah, Andy is.
And that is lovely. That's so nice. You can see the heavy-lidded eyes that Karloff's got there. I mean, he did have prosthetics on his eyes, but one of the reasons that Jack Pierce made his eyes look heavier was he got that really soulful look. And he
deep bit there.
Yeah, and you can see he's took his dentures out, and he's got really high cheekbones. Weirdly enough, like a lot of actors that play horror movies that you take for granted, he was originally a very good-looking chap, and one of the reasons he went to Hollywood was somebody said, he was a very good-looking actor, but we've got so used to looking at him in Frankenstein makeup with a big flat brow.
Am I right in thinking that Universal Monsters? Now, correct me. I've heard somewhere Universal Studios have actually licensed the brow.
They have. They've licensed that part of the makeup. That's the reason why Hammer Frankenstein looks totally different.
Is it just the brow?
It's just the top of the head, the flat top of the head, and I think the bolts as well.
So they licensed that? Wow.
I think so, because that's why the Hammer movies look so much different.
Right.
It's because obviously they can't use the Universal makeup, so they had to come up with their own. It's like Bram Stoker's family were never very happy about the book being turned into a movie. They hated it. That's why that Nosferatu movie by Count Orloff is called Count Orloff, and Nosferatu is called Nosferatu rather than Dracula, because when they wanted to make it, they wouldn't sign off on it. So Hollywood were the only people that had the license to do an actual Dracula, and there was a lot of negotiations with Stoker's family about using those. So a lot of Dracula-like movies were made, but aren't called Dracula because they can't get the license in. So Universal realised the power of this makeup, particularly the stuff done by Jack Pierce's original ones, and they've copyrighted this image of the Frankenstein's monster, which is kind of understandable, isn't it? When you think about it. And what I like about the Hammer Frankenstein, even though he doesn't look like anything like Karloff, he does look like somebody's been sewn together from parts.
Yeah.
He's a really horrific. And if you think about a 50s moviegoer going to see this, okay, Karloff's a bit creepy and he'd scare them a bit. But when you see Christopher Lee's mangled face, and then you see him later on in the film when he's been shot in the face with a shotgun and brought to life again, that's a scary makeup. So, it's horses for courses. I mean, Christopher Lee's Frankenstein is probably getting towards the more schlock horror kind of thing of the 70s, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's one of your favourites. So.
Oh yeah, I love this. I mean, look at it. What's not to love? I mean, it's a heroic kind of bust, isn't it? It's heroic nice. In a sense that if you saw that, the chiselled features, the flat-topped head, the hunched shoulders and the thick neck, it's so typical of Karloff.
Yeah,
and like I say,
nice,
you look at the face, there's no denying that's Karloff. You can see it.
It sells really well.
I'm not surprised with it. I mean, that's a beautiful kit, and it's compact too, isn't it? It's not a shelf killer.
It's not going to take up too much shelf space.
Yeah, we often talk about shelf killers, big kits that you really love, and then you put it on your shelf, and then you have to move your other kits.
Which brings us nicely onto our next shelf killer. Bill, on the last episode, or the Halloween episode, was talking about a Frankenstein versus Wolfman.
Yeah.
I think we'll just briefly go through that, because I think there's definitely meat on the bones for different pieces in future things, but that one was a Frankenstein versus Wolfman, I believe.
That's right, yeah. It was Lon Chaney as the Wolfman and Bela Lugosi as the monster.
That's the one. Now, basically, that one was sculpted by Jeff Yeager for the States. It was sculpted for a company called Rebel Resin, I'm sure. I in the episode before, called him Danny, but it's not Danny. Danny's his brother. It's Tony Salsini, I'm pretty sure. Sorry if I've got the name wrong. Me and Tony were chatting for a long time about fetching the kit over to the UK, because shipping costs kill you, don't they?
They do.
Now, this one's a big piece. It's the iconic movie scene where he's jumping on him. I'm going to get one cast up because Bill wants to have a look at it.
I mean, I saw it when you first got the original over here. You got it in a box, didn't you? And you showed it in a box. And I have to say, not only is it a superb sculpt, and it's clearly Lugosi, and it's clearly Lon Chaney as the Wolfman. They're spotless. They're like every Jaeger. It's undeniably like it should be. You got the Wolfman up high,
he's
a
on
broken
broken
archway. Yeah,
yeah.
They're basically fighting in Frankenstein's laboratory, the shattered remains, I think, of Castle Frankenstein.
Yeah, and then and you get like little bits and pieces. Well, how we come to acquire it is we thrashed a deal out. We got a cast. Unfortunately, in them days when the kit was released, the casts weren't super clean. So it took a while for us to get this piece to a standard that we were happy with, and then we moulded it and we've put it out in Europe, and it's still available.
It's a proper kit as well, because there's half a dozen pieces in there, isn't there?
There's quite a few pieces.
Quite a few pieces, so it's a treat to build. It's a
big.
treat to paint, and it's massive, but not in a kind of breadth way. It's quite a tallish kit, isn't it? It's big, but it's compact.
Yes, I mean
So
Jeff's nailed
and it's
it.
worth the space.
Jeff's nailed it, and then there was a gentleman called Kevin Fuller who did some add-ons for it, which has very rarely been seen. So I'm going to try and get one done for Bill, and so Bill can have a look at it and see what he thinks and give it a proper review. But what we need to do, obviously, is get the thing on the table. We thought we'd do this video today because we've quite been intensely covering the Hammer stuff. Didn't realise we were going to be that intense, but we are. We just chat, so we do. So I think what we're going to do is split them up, make them more bite-sized. So we'll do Frankensteins, we'll do werewolves, etc., and then we'll do the 80s for you.
You know, it's easier if you just stick a kit in front of me and I can talk for ages about
Yes,
the
he
kit,
can.
and
He's very enthusiastic, so that's good.
If we sit together like this,
Christmas is
10
coming.
minutes is 20 minutes is an hour. You know. But what's not to love? We're surrounded by fantastic kits, aren't we? I mean,
a cup of tea, chocolate biscuit, and then you can have it. So thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Like I say, subscribe to the channel, smash a like, put anything you want in the notifications. If you want me and Bill, anything off me to talk to me and Bill about anything, just give us a shout.
Or if you want to correct us about any information,
please do.
Crap about the film,
Please do. We'll look forward to that. So we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.